Yeah, that was such a beefy chapter. Wow.
Yeah, I started to reading and I also re-listened to Peter Kenny
Mm.
audiobook and I was like, shit, it doesn't finish. It's like,
Yeah.
okay, I remember that there was a lot of stuff.
Hey guys, welcome to Breakfast in Beauclair, a Global Witcher podcast. My name is Alyssa from Kaer Morhen, and I'll be your host as you, I, and our international Hansa accompany Geralt of Rivia and his destiny, Cyrilla of Sintra, across the continent. We're here with the penultimate chapter of Andrzej Sapkowski's Tower of Swallows, but that is not it for the end of this season of Breakfast in Beauclair. After chapter 11, join us for a special discussion of Crossroads of Ravens with a few members of the Hansa, as well as another featured episode with David French, the English translator of the Witcher books, and Peter Kenny, the audiobook narrator for the Witcher series. Thank you to our patrons and our producer level patrons, Katie the Redhead of Toussaint, Jacob B, Charlotte from Eggenberg Glamry, the original Brooch, Libby, John of Verblia, Tom from Australia, Jill Kate the Tabby Witch, Ollie from Sweden, James Carson III, Miriam Miftamaria, Softy, Lisa C, and Sidna. If you'd like to learn more about supporting Breakfast in Beauclair, visit patreon.com/breakfastinbeauclair. As for this episode, Nicola from Italy calls in for Andrzej Sapkowski's Tower of Swallows Chapter 10. Join us as we discuss the pancake treatment, the pursuit of democracy, Italian references in Tower of Swallows, fulfilling the promise of foreshadowing, the ethics of retribution, death and the value of life, and the coming of Ciri of Kaer Morhen. Without further ado, let's get to our discussion of Andrzej Sapkowski's Tower of Swallows Chapter 10. Hey guys, welcome to Breakfast in Beauclair. My name is Alyssa, and today we're welcoming a member of the Hansa to the show. You'll recognize today's guest from episodes 80 and 101, covering Time of Contempt, Chapter 4, and Baptism of Fire, Chapter 5, Part 1. He hails from Verona, where he's currently pursuing a PhD in neuroscience. Outside of the lab, he loves practicing medieval sword fencing, drawing, or getting lost in books on biology, science, history, and anything else that sparks his curiosity. Please welcome Nicola from Italy. Hello, Nicola. So lovely to have you back.
Hi. Nice to be here again.
Yes. In podcast land, I think you were on not too long ago. But what have you been up to since the last time that you were on the show?
So quite a lot, personally at least. So I'm almost finishing my PhD. So I'm
Wow.
almost at the end, and I'm coming home in a couple of days from my 6 month abroad period. So it has been quite a challenge. And I bought a house with my girlfriend. So quite a revolutionary year.
Oh my goodness, congratulations! What a massive year. Wow. Where are you currently studying?
I'm studying in Verona. Now I'm finishing the period in Cologne in Germany.
Oh, wow. Yeah, Cologne's a beautiful city.
Yeah, I love the city. The lab and the group was amazing. So it's been an amazing experience. But after 6 months, I'm also like happy to go home.
Yeah. What was like the biggest takeaway from, I think, spending time abroad and from being able to pursue your degree in Cologne?
For me, it was complete change of both the working habits and also the environment that there is. It's a different environment, different focus. Back in Verona, I was inside a project that was shared among other people, while here I was more alone on my project.
Mm.
So also for like character building or at least confidence building, it's like, okay, I'm able to do it on my own, back on my back and say, okay, I actually learned something about in these 3 years and not only joking around. It has been very interesting and very important also, not only scientifically speaking, because of course there are always questions, but also it was an amazing period.
Sounds like a true baptism of fire.
Yeah,
I know that you mentioned you do medieval fencing. How is that going? Have you had the time wrapping up your PhD to continue that?
I'm continuing to do it, and I was fortunate enough that I found Hema school that also here in Cologne. So I was continuing to do it in a different environment also there. But yeah, I think that it's growing as a sport activity. So if anyone want to get involved, I think that the easiest way is to check in the city or in the neighborhood if there is some schools or some academias, because I think that there are quite a lot, at least from what I've seen in both in Italy and in Germany. There are quite a lot to choose because there are different school of thought. So there are the more German, or the what I do that is following specific manuals of the age. So different schools, different approaches, but everyone is super helpful. I always find people that are very accommodating to one another. So it's a very nice environment. I'm never get let down by all the people that I met that are doing fencing. So it's a nice community also. So that one, don't get scared about getting hit or something. It's part of the deal, but usually it's nothing particularly dangerous. So
I love that you're able to pursue some of these like hobbies and activities too, in addition to your PhD. And I'm really excited to have your perspective on this chapter, considering it is loaded with fights. And I'd love to hear a little bit from you about what that could look like or how you imagine it as a swordsman yourself. So today we'll continue our discussion of Andrzej Sapkowski's Tower of Swallows with Chapter 10, in which Kenna recalls unmasking Rince, Ciri's escape from Unicorn, and the Witcher girl's brutal vengeance at Dundare. Meanwhile, Visigoda faces his final moments. Here's a quick synopsis of the chapter from future Alyssa. In Chapter 10, Joanna Kenna Selburn, a psionic, recalls her past with Tawny Owl's Hansa. After losing Bonhart's trail, Kenna sensed an unseen spy among their group. With Tawny Owl's help, they unmasked the Invisible Man as Rince, Vilgefortz's agent. But before his interrogation could begin, Bonhart arrived with Ciri. In the present, Ciri grows restless at Visigoda's cottage. Her worsening dreams convince her that she must leave to find the Tower of the Swallow. Their fierce debate pits her thirst for vengeance against his philosophy of restraint, but Ciri insists she is a witcher and must act. Kenna and Ciri separately recall what happened during her escape in the village of Unicorn. Bonhart, Tawny Owl, Vilgefortz, and Rince negotiated the girl's fate as the soldiers guard her outside. Kenna's curiosity led her to briefly connect with Ciri psionically. The surge of magic allowed Ciri to attack her captors and escape. Neredan Seka aided her escape, sacrificing himself while Bonhart and Tawny Owl's men pursued her, but were unable to capture her again. Now, 5 weeks after her escape, Ciri finally departs Visigoda's cottage, painting her face with soot before heading towards Scentlock. On Samhain's Eve, she faces some of Tawny Owl's sentries in Dundare. Declaring herself not Falca, but Ciri of Kaer Morhen, she slays them all in brutal vengeance. Even as the innkeeper recoils in horror, Ciri repeats, half with conviction and half with uncertainty, I'm a witcher. I kill monsters. Back in the swamps, Visigoda hears the banshee's cry, auguring his own death, and prays that the gods will protect the Witcher girl. So now that we've gotten a quick synopsis of the chapter from future Alyssa, Nicola, I'd love to hear from you. What were some of your highlights, lowlights, standout moments, and overall thoughts about Chapter 10?
it's very interesting chapter. It's quite a transitional chapter as growth for Ciri as a chapter and as a book in a sort of bigger way, because it's always like that in this book, but in particular in this chapter, it's quite a transitional moment. We see the moment before the meeting with Visogota and the aftermath of his healing, both physically and mentally, the moment in which both time periods that we have seen in the all throughout the book merge, and then we continue on with a single time. I really love this kind of transition moment. The two main highlights that I have are the bad guys get together, the meetup of the different bad guys that I think form quite a scary and a menacing force. Till now, there have been always these many characters that are evil in their own way, that are menace to our protagonists, but they will always been scattered, minding their own stuff, always lurking around, but as a separate force. That's the moment when they all come together and start to be a little bit scary,
Yeah.
and it's a real big deal. So it's like, okay, should be scary enough. And of course, the preparation city, and it's quite an engaging and cinematic moment. I think that reading through it feels like watching a movie, or it reminds me a lot of the Killing Monster trailer and the trailer for The Witcher 4. It reminds me a lot of these quick fights. So quite engaging.
This chapter is so meaty. I think in the audiobooks, it's like one of the longest chapters. I think it's almost 2 hours. There's just so much that happens in it, from, Kenna having her flashbacks in the Citadel to everything that happens with Rince and Tawny Owl to, as you said, like the evil person's convention that happens in Unicorn to, and then everything after that, and then the timelines converging. And I think there's a couple of highlights for me in this, outside of the core plot, that I just find amusing. And I think that speak to Sapkowski's not only writing, but perspective and style. Like when he talks about the upheaval in the Citadel between Kenna and her cellmates, and how the minority has been reversed, and now it's one man who thinks he can own everything against these three women, two of whom have been on the front lines. So really they could do anything they wanted. And it's such a silly thing to take up so many paragraphs for, but like it's very fun and speaks to, I think, Sapkowski's writing style. And then again, that's doubled down on like Skellen openly being like, I just want democracy. I want an insurrection so that we can get a constitutional monarchy and then eventually democracy. And they're like, what's democracy? And then he goes to explain it and they just laugh at him. As readers, in like a meta way, it is funny to read because we obviously know the course of history from the medieval period until now. And that is where most of the modern world has ended up. I do appreciate that Sapkowski is able to take modern ideas and infuse them into this medieval story. And this is a perfect example of that. And then my last highlight is, of course, Rince's pancake treatment. This is really the scene that made me love Tawny Owl's Hansa, because as silly as the whole thing is, and as generally morally gray and evil as they are, there is something so ridiculous about not only this idea, but its execution, and how Kenna keeps saying, Tawny Owl would make a really good actor. And I think that that's really, really fun. So there's, I think, a lot of grimdark, but a few light moments that I think are done in such a way that only Sapkowski could have done it. So I really like his stamp on this chapter.
Yeah, I agree. I agree.
And Nicola, you also found a couple of Italian references as you were going through the chapter. Do you mind telling the Hansa about it?
Yeah, the first one, I think that it's in the first chapter. It's about the swallow and the crow that Visigotta talk with Cini. That's another example of giving names to character that in other languages reveal quite a lot, quite easily the metaphor, because Visigotta is called Visigotta of Corvo, but Corvo in Italian means crow. There's a character that is called the swallow, that is Ciri, and the other one that is called the crow. And it's like, okay, I guess that they are the two of them talking about.
It's not subtle, is it?
Yeah, it's not that subtle anymore. It's like, okay, I get it. The second one that I met, it's very, very, very subtle. Instead, it's strange that he knows it. In the chapter when City and Bonhart are in the sword shop, they talk about different swords, and he points out a sword with an engraving that is something like, "Do not cheat me without reason, and do not cheat me without honor." That was the real guy. That was
Oh.
the sword of Giovanni da Bandenera, an Italian condottiere from the Renaissance of the Medici family,
Mm.
and he had it engraved on it. So, and there is a couple of statue with his sword with the exact same engraving. So it was like, okay, why he knows about that specific, like, niched thing? Well, the last one, it's actually from this chapter, and it's in the opening scene. Supposed to describe the cell and the companions in the cell, and describe Kofu as dancing as beaten by a tarantula. And I think that could be an interesting connection to the tarantella, that is a traditional dancing of the south of Italy. And from what I know, it was called like that because the dancing and like the frenetic dance was a cure for the people that was bitten by the tarantula. So I was thinking about a possible connection about it. I don't know if there is also in English this type of connection, but it connects to this very traditional stuff. I don't even know it too much because it's from a different region. So the connection struck me.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm actually looking up because I was curious. The passage on that Kenna penetrated his brain so deeply that Koet howled like a werewolf and cavorted around the cell as though bitten by a tarantula. So the reason why I know the dance is actually not from uh, any sort of pure cultural reference. I think J.K. Rowling in Harry Potter had for if I remember correctly, the spell to force people to dance was Talentallegra or something like that. I I don't even remember now, but it was, I think, from the Italian word for the dance and then turn that into a wizarding spell of some kind. So that just like itched something in the back of my brain that I haven't thought about in about like 20 years. But what an interesting connection. And I love that you were able to bring the swordsman's engraving as well. I remember it sticking out to me enough that I made a Good Morin post about it. So if you look at the Good Morin page, there's a post that has, I believe it's like 5 men in, I think it's a satirical or newspaper cartoon. It's a hand holding a dagger, and in between his fingers are a number of men as well. And yeah, it says, "Draw me not without reason, sheath me not without honor." I mean, we know Sapkowski was a traveling merchant for a while, so I wonder if he passed through Italy.
Yep.
Well, thank you for bringing all of that fun cultural insight to the discussion. I feel like it's one of my favorite things when guests like you can come on and share what uniquely stands out to them about The Witcher and about Sapkowski's writing. Much of Chapter 1's foreshadowing comes to fruition in Chapter 10. So we open Tower of Swallows with a beggar's song about the Dundare massacre, and Sapkowski also ties the equinox to liminal times in both folklore and elven cosmology. How does this particular equinox mark a threshold in Ciri's personal journey as she passes into legend?
The equinox as a period, as a day, it has always been since prehistory, I think, some period of great change and transformation. And I think that connects with the fact that there is 12 hours of day and 12 hours of night. So it inspired a lot of culture over the time to think about the two equinox as a changing moment. And I think that setting all this story around the equinox, I think that's quite a clever way to show once again the changing that City is going through. So she's changing quite a lot. Moreover, the legends about the equinox and the phantom story that we hear, I think that adds to the like, atmosphere and that she builds around herself, probably involuntary, because I don't think that's quite a lot of what happens before the Dundare fights. It's programmed, like
Mm-hmm.
his entrance, her makeup, and everything else. The beggars enters immediately before and start talking about exactly that stuff. Could be a sort of psychological warfare in that case.
Yeah.
That's down to see because it's very good planning. Otherwise, it's a matter of coincidence, but it builds up on her character, on her mythos, and I can imagine that this story passing down town folks, people to continue to saying about these events ending up in the legend that it's formed and reaches like Game of Telephone where everyone had something. It's
Yeah.
start to become something legendary and supernatural.
I think you nailed it. You know, when we open the book, there's all of this preamble that I think when you're reading it, you're like, why do we have like 20 pages on the Elven calendar? And it's quite dense. Everything really comes to fruition here in chapter 10. So we get that through line and that book ending, as you said, between the beginning of the book and what happens at Dundare, really. And the thing with the Elven calendar is, as you said, a opportunity, like a threshold for change. It is a time that, as the beggar says, it is like the darkest dark night. It is the time in which the worlds get close together and like specters roam the earth and yada yada yada. And he builds it up like a ghost story. And I think it is supported by just this cultural mythos, as you said, around that time of the year. It is already inherently spooky. They have a culture that is wont to justify anything with a supernatural explanation. I think Sapkowski has said that over the course of his series. So I believe both the beggar whispering things into the century's ears and also the medieval and cultural context, they are already afraid. And it is brutal. We'll talk about the brutality of those deaths later, but I think the other thing that, as you said, is interesting is this game of telephone. And we hear from the opening that this is a beggar song. We have no idea if, of course, it is from the beggar that is in the tavern witnessing the massacre, but we can assume it probably started with him and then many more joined the chorus. The interesting discrepancy between what actually happened and the opening is that it says, "To Dundare they came at dead of night for to seek the witcher maid. They ringed the hamlet from all sides and sealed it with the barricade. Seize her they would in perfidy, but their plans were all in vain. Ere the sun arose on the frozen road, 3 dozen brigands lay slain." So hearing that and seeing what actually happened, there's a lot in theory wrong with this, where Ciri actually ambushed them rather than the other way around. And also there were 4 men, not 36.
Yeah,
But you can see, as you said, like how the story gets bigger and how her legend just grows and just adds to the cacophony of stories until she is unrecognizable, I think.
exactly. The amount of foes that increases. The first beggar that say there are four of them and she slay everyone. But I imagine that the second one will say no, they were six because my story it's cooler than yours.
Yeah.
So they were six and they all die. And going around with these four X amount of time, we will end up with 30 something people that are immediately slain in some way, and you believe it and say, okay, probably in a couple of rounds it will be 50 people, and
And I think it also is a good almost segue into all of the themes that we explore in Lady of the Lake in the next book. So I like that we kind of get like a little teaser here about reality versus story and legend. So as we continue on, Ciri argues that only violent retribution can answer evil, while Visigoda insists that such rage only perpetuates destruction. Whose vision of justice do you think is more convincing?
personally I'm more similar at least to Visigota's
Hmm.
view, so not violence blindly against everyone that seems evil.
Yeah.
I think that they both have their merits because, of course, Ciri, in her point of view, comes out from very evil deeds and very violent life, especially in her last period. So, of course, she will respond fire with fire. So she responds to violence with other violence because she knows only that way of dealing with evil.
Hmm.
But I think that it speaks the truth when Visigoda points out the horror vacui of nature. And I think that it's something quite real in the mean that if you completely destroy one thing, something else will fill that void. It won't be poking a hole in the whole society and okay, you remove the evil guy, no one will do nothing else, everything will change and someone else will become the evil guy. So a more thoughtful approach can be more effective.
Hmm.
On the other side, the approach of Visigoth of simply shutting off from everyone, only think about what will be good and what should be bad, doesn't lead to any change. So they both need each other to actually get some changes. And I think that a third party that could be interesting to see in this philosophical debate would be Geralt's point of view, because of course he is not in this chapter, but knowing his love of philosophical debates, he would enter the conversation. But I think that we already know his point of view on this type of manner,
Hmm.
because we know his point of view for what concerns neutrality and choosing the lesser evil. So reading at it, I thought about conversation that Ciri and Geralt had in Blood of Elves, when Geralt said that you don't need to feel everything, but you just simply need to kill hatred. I think that that's the better solution of the two between Ciri and Visigoth. If you really need to act as Geralt has done, for example, in the Lesser Evil short story. So try to think about it, try to find a way without bloodshed. But if you really need to act on it, and you must do it, have the will and the strength to do it. So I think that Siri here, it's coming out of a traumatic experience and hitting back to everyone, because not doing anything would be getting hurt even more. So
Hmm.
she has to fight off everything that stands in her way. But it's a very self-destructive and I think also damaging viewpoint, and I think that there is a hint of the change of her mindset on the end of the chapter.
Yeah, I certainly agree. I think it's very easy to draw a line between the sides of their debate and their own personal histories. So, of course, Ciri feels that way, as you said, because of the vengeance that she has because of the violence that's been done to her. Whereas Visigota comes from a scholarly world. And so a lot of his approach to violence and to retribution is considerate of hypotheticals. Of like, of course, this is principled. Like, you need a principled approach to this. And Siri's point is that, well, reality doesn't work like that. It did stand out to me when I was listening to Peter Kenny's audiobook how angry she is and how horrifying I think some of the images that she conjures up are. She says, like, an eye for an eye, no, both eyes for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, no, all your teeth for a tooth. And she talks about like disemboweling somebody, and that is some form of justice against evil when she's seeing their blood soak into the earth. And like, again, it's much more immersive when I'm hearing Peter Kenny narrate it. So I was sitting in an Uber and I was just like, oh my God. I was like, wow, this is kind of yucky. And alternatively, I don't disagree with her, though, that in order for Visigota's approach to justice to work, it requires everybody to be on board and also to have like a certain shared belief that justice is fair and that people have some sense of order and benefit of the doubt that they want good in the world. And so, like you, I think that the true solution is closer to the middle, probably toward Visigota's side in like a comfortable and, progressive society. But I do understand why she feels the way that she does. And I'm sure that there are cases outside of my own lived experience and even my own imagination in which that kind of punishment is probably effective. But I don't necessarily agree with it. And truthfully, like I said, I struggle to imagine a case in which it would be. It's interesting to contrast that with Geralt's conversation with the prefect a few chapters ago, where Geralt has the same conversation. This prefect has covered the town in like these awful relics of beheaded bodies and disemboweled parts and has like decorated the scaffolds with all of this. And Geralt has the same conversation of just like, this is the kind of world in which a Witcher thrives, in which like corruption runs rampant because people are too scared. I definitely agree with you that I think Geralt is also somewhere in the middle. And I think we can align ourselves well with him. And as we keep going, we see, as we said, the meeting of evil minds between Bonhart, Vilgefortz, Rents, and Tawny Owl, aka Stefan Skellen. Each man defines Ciri differently. Bonhart as property, Skellen as a liability, Vilgefortz as a womb, and a means to a prophecy. Do you think any of them actually see Ciri as a person, or is she purely a path to their ambitions?
I think that to them, she's not a person. She's simply a something that they need to get to the end, and it's a dehumanization because it's like they know that there is this girl, this child, more or less, and they simply see it as a mean to an end and simply something that they need or something from which they can profit. In the case of Bonard, simply selling to the bestseller. That's quite unsettling because it's deeply demoralizing and deeply moving moment in which you feel it like disdain about this person that can speak about a girl in such a way, such as like, oh, I wanted she is alive simply because I need that part of her body.
Hmm.
The rest I don't care. You shouldn't treat not even animals or objects like that. So talking about something that you don't see not even as a living being, you simply see it as a checklist and I simply need that part of the body and you need it to be dead and you want simply money about it. Okay, we can arrange and align our goals and everyone will be happy. That's quite disturbing.
Yeah, as you said, it's incredibly dehumanizing. Like they treat her as an animal or something even less than an animal. It's horrifying what they put her through and also what they have planned for her. I think the thing that I find most creepy is Vilgefortz asking Bonhart, "Do you have any desire to rule the world?" And Bonhart's like, "Nope." And Vilgefortz says, "Well, in addition to paying you 20-fold of your current rate, I know that you're into a very specific kind of voyeurism, so why don't I invite you into my lab to see what I do to the girl?" And then that intrigues him. I think that is also what sets Kenna off, and Kenna outside is like, wow, this is super gross, and I'm in a bit of a pickle now. Even Skellen finds it a little repulsive. I think on one hand, when Skellen thinks about her as a liability, like he's serving possibly some of the other nobles within Nilfgaard, and he doesn't really want Ciri to marry Emir because it would just make his vision closer to reality. Whether or not it's a realistic view, who knows, but at least he just mostly sees her as a liability, and he just wants to get rid of her. And I think in some way that is somehow the most merciful relationship that any of them have with her, whereas Bonhart more so, and Vilgefortz just want to see her suffer. And it's really gross. Like, there's no other word that I can think of to describe it. And I know that's quite elementary, but like, ugh.
And about the pleasure as a, I thought about it as something like give me your candies and I give you the tickets to a concert. In exchange like that, it's understandable. You'd say, okay, if you really like the band or if you really like the concert, you will immediately do it.
Hmm.
And thinking about the fact that he enjoyed so much, something so cruel and so sick,
Yeah.
butchering a human being is very,
Uh.
yeah, sick or
Yeah.
gross. It's like something's wrong, really wrong in
Yeah.
this guy.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's how casual they are about it is
Yeah,
weird because, like, I think to most people, it is a sick and depraved kind of indulgence. And for them, it's like talking about the weather, or as you said, just like a silly Facebook Marketplace trade. They're like, yeah, let's just do this. And it's awful. And Kenna has her own reservations about it when she overhears. This prompts her to want to probe Ciri's mind. She's really curious. She hears all of this stuff that these men are saying, and she's like, I'm pretty grossed out by this, but in order to get to the bottom of this situation, I just need to go into Falca's mind herself. I need to understand. So presumably, Kenna can make her own choice about how she's going to play a role in what comes next. But when Kenna attempts to read Ciri's mind, their brief mental connection not only restores Ciri's magic, but also unnerves Kenna. What does this moment reveal about empathy, power, and unintended consequences?
So I think that this speaks quite a lot about Kenna's lust for knowledge and also power, probably.
Hmm.
I don't think that she's completely serving either Skellen or the Empire. She's simply trying to do what's best for her. So she follow everyone that can help her or everyone she can get something out of it. When Skellen referred to her as Madam,
Yeah.
so she's like, I can be something important. I'm raising the ranks. And so it's not that she is fully committed to his cause and he agrees with your views and I want to help you. I just want to get more power, get more
Hmm.
money out of it, probably, but doing everything that it's best for her before any allegiance. So I think that probably connecting to Ciri mentally, it's more of I need to know as much as possible about this girl. More knowledge means that she can understand better who to trust and also getting to know some secrets, something like that, can be something very important for her. As much as telling to Skellen that there is a spy in the group,
Hmm.
it's simply a matter of okay, I discovered this, I will keep it till I need it, and when I need to say this secret that I know, I will use it, and then I continue to understand how it's evolving and where to go to get better. And the fact that this contact reawakens his magic, I think that's completely unintended consequences. And I think that probably she didn't even think about it as a possibility because
Yeah.
probably she's very used to probing people's mind without problems. So she constantly do it. I don't think that she does it out of empathy or out of let's help her, even though she knows all this gross stuff that the other guys want to do to this poor girl. She doesn't decide in that moment, okay, I want to help her because I don't like what they're saying. She simply want to understand what she's hiding to side to whichever best option.
I agree with some of that. I'll disagree with some of it as well. I think, at least when I read the book, it comes across to me that Kenna is like just following orders. I don't know if I can tell if she has any like true military ambition. Like, I'm not sure if she like actually wants to climb the ranks of the Nilfgaardian military. Because I think at some point, even she's surprised that, as you said, Skellen refers to her in the English translation as like Miss Selburne. And she's like, wow, that's what he'd say to an officer. Ooh. But I don't know if she's pursuing that. She refers to herself a lot as like, I'm just a simple girl and I don't know anything and like I'm way over my head. I think that, though, speaks to her desire for knowledge, as you said, where I think like the pieces are kind of falling into place for her, that she is in over her head and like whatever incredible political scheme is happening around Ciri, she's such a small part of it, whether or not she can have an impact on it, and it's going to impact her. I think that she definitely goes over to, she hears all this stuff from the men, and it might not come from a place of empathy, I think, as you said. But I think she wants to figure out, like, what's her next move and what is she to believe? She discovers, before Tawny Owl does, that Neriton Seka is a spy for Vadier. She starts to see Rince's mind breaking down. She understands the cruelty that Bonhart and Vilgeforce will inflict on this girl. I think she panics, which is why she goes over to Ciri. And as you said, I don't think she's expecting that response. She's done this dozens of times. She was recruited specifically for her skill, and Ciri, by any stretch of the imagination, is just a normal, violent, but relatively normal girl. She has no reason to suspect anything supernatural. I think it's a little bit of a deus ex machina that kind of is like, here, have this mental weapon. And Ciri's like, oh, yay, and just goes off attacking the Hansa. But I do think that it is an unintended consequence, as you said, that kind of probes her mind and then is not only taken aback by Ciri's strength, as unintended as it is, and also that it's just enough for Ciri to incite her own escape, which I don't think Kenna planned at all. So she wasn't able to take like an active part. She couldn't even stand. So she couldn't prevent Ciri from escaping once everything kicked off. But it's hard to say if she would have given the opportunity, but she even lets Neriton go. She's like, I'm not going to say anything about you being a spy, but I can't help you either. However, I do think that this is an important turn for her where she's suddenly given the opportunity to think for herself, or she's given enough information that she will be able to think for herself.
Yeah, I agree with you on the fact that probably she's not there in a militaristic point of view,
Mm.
but I meant more on a selfish point of view. So
Like self-preservation.
exactly, exactly. Like she started this job with this group because of her skill, and so she's working with them. The more she knows, the more she try to spin it in a better way for her, not because of her agreement with one ideology or the other, but simply because that's the best way for her to exit that particular job that is starting to fall apart.
Yeah.
Yeah, with that, I agree.
And to that end, Ciri's escape causes obviously a huge commotion, a number of deaths, and we see deaths represented all across the chapter. So in Ciri's escape, Chloe Stitz dies treacherously, the sentries fall swiftly at Dundare by Ciri's hand, and Visigoda dies unseen in the swamps. What does this variety across the chapter suggest about the value of life and the ways that different characters confront or inflict its end?
I think that there are a lot of death both in this chapter and in all throughout the series that show the fragility of life. So showing that some of them are pointless or accidental, some of them are more important or more earned, but they're always very, and something that I also like about the series as a whole, that they are very truthful, or at least they're not always epic battles, epic duels that ends up with one death. There are also characters that simply dies of accident or simply because someone else chose a different path and result in their death. So with Chloe, it's simply she's doing her job. She's simply aiming because she has been told to shoot at this girl, and she dies simply because someone else decided that that girl shouldn't be shot, shouldn't be killed. So her death is sort of the best way, the easiest and fastest way to stop someone to kill Siri. She's trying to kill her, and as a result, the easiest and most rapid solution is kill the shooter, and she won't kill the targets. So that's sort of an ungrateful and fizzling death that you read through it and can happen in a real situation like that, or in reality it's simply a matter of 1 second or real moment, while there are other deaths that are more interesting for the character involved, like Visigoth or Cyprian Fripp that dies violently in crying delirium, that speak to what kind of person it is and what kind of point he is in his life, and eventually in his death. So confronting death in delirium and in a very violent way. While I think that Pizzicotta's death, especially being unseen, I think that's The culmination of when Ciri and Visigoth are talking, nobody could see them because there's no one near the hut and in the bog. It's sort of a continuation of his life that continued as being alone. There's been Ciri for a short period, and he dies alone. It's sad because you know that this character dies,
Mhm.
but at least he's shows his character is deep motivation, his deep desire on helping Siri, and I think that all throughout the book and all throughout the chapter, he is being a sort of healer both for her body and her mind. He's sort of a therapist to her.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
continues to this moment is very wish to City to her well-being.
Yeah. Starting with Visigoth and working backwards. I think, as you said earlier, Visigoth's death feels very complete in such a way that he's turned away, I think, from his like original train of thought. Like when Ciri came, he was very much like a solo hermit and didn't want anything to do with anybody, had been exiled from both the Northern Realms as well as Nilfgaard. And as you said, he ends his journey with calling upon gods he doesn't believe in to help protect a girl whose life he has changed by being an active role in it, by actively taking care of her. And it's no longer about philosophy, it is about the things that he can tangibly do to help her and to take care of her over the last 5 weeks. In a meta sense, yes, it's his close in the story. He has served as her therapist and as her healer over the course of Tower of Swallows. But it does seem a fitting time for his character to also meet death. And I do like that one of his closing thoughts is like, life is beautiful despite everything. And I think there is an appreciation for that as well, despite his cynicism and what he's experienced in the world. I think looking at the other deaths across this chapter, I think Ciri inadvertently kills one of the soldiers through that psychic connection. Chloe, who Kenna recalls, is like looking like a child, like in death. She's so small, curled up. And then Bonhart smites Nerid and Seka, who gives Ciri just enough time to escape. Tawny Owl does kill the villager who killed Chloe, just with an Orion straight to the face. It presumably impacts his brain and causes him to fall into seizure. And then everything that happens at Dundare. There's nothing that makes me want to die in my sleep more than reading a chapter like this. I'm like, oh my God, it can be so gruesome and so horrifying looking at death like that. And it's interesting seeing it in the context and perspective of these characters, for which this is relatively normal everyday life, is that they encounter scenes like this. And so I find it to be a bit horrifying as a reader, but I'm a very squishy person and this stresses me out. But I do think that, like, for people who are so nonchalant about inflicting death, it's interesting to see what happens when they experience it and when they also have to confront it. So, yeah, it's like sometimes incredibly dishonorable. I think the kinds of deaths that we see across this chapter. And I think that there is, as we said, like, especially Dundare, a certain amount of confidence that those sentries have, that they think they can just take Falca and take the money. And they're not expecting to be confronted. And as you said, that they revert to these delusions of childhood, to calling out for their mothers, to suddenly being confronted with loss. So it's very heavy, but like it is such a spectrum of experiences that we as readers get to see.
I agree. It's very interesting to see the nonchalantly way of being violent towards other, but the moment in which they face their own demise or their own moments of not being able to fight back, they revert to a childlike status. So they return to being completely harmless, completely don't know what to say, they don't know what's happening. And I think that speaks to the card of how they really are, how they are deeply so they might act tough and saying, "Yeah, we are strong. We will capture her and do whatever we want." But inside, they are not that strong or not that mature as a people as a character. So yeah, I
Mm.
think that's sort of removing the blankets and seeing what's really happening inside their heads and what's their nature. If you peel off the exterior of grumpy old guy living all alone, rejecting everyone because all society is wrong and everyone is miserable and it's better to stay on your own. It's good to see that at the end of the day, inside there is still joy or still appreciation for life and also for others. So not
Mm.
simply watching himself and say shutting off everyone, but he still very much think and feel for Siri. So
Yeah, as they say, like death is an equalizer. It's like one of the constants of life. Death and taxes. Um, at the end of the chapter, the beggar says that Ciri is death. Like you are death, and Ciri at some point is like, "Yeah, I know." But there is something to be said, I think, also in her representation of death as a nightmare for the sentries at Dundare versus greeting death like a friend, which is, I think, what Visigoda does. And so when you see like all the horror stories and all the ghost stories that happen that lead up to the massacre, Ciri falls into that. Her appearance as a specter with like the grease paint and everything falls into that representation of death as like sudden and swift and malicious and vengeful. And that's exactly what those men experience in the tavern. Whereas I think with Visigoda, as we've said, there is kind of like a recognition and an acceptance, you know, even though he's scared, even though he tries to drown out the banshee's cry all throughout the book. I think there is an acceptance in that. And, you know, over the last 5 weeks, Ciri has become a friend and a confidant and an important person to him. And so, as we've spoken about, it's nice that, or it's reflective that his last words are about her and about wanting her protection. I think that's an interesting way to dice it.
now that you mentioned about the great equalizer and the good death, I was reminded of note that I think that Leonardo da Vinci wrote
Mm.
that was something like, as a good day of work or a good day gives you a good night of sleep, a well spent life or a good spent life brings you a good death.
Mm.
And I think that's sort of similar to what we are seeing. And so if you live at the fullest, or at least if you reach a point in which you embrace death
Mhm.
peacefully as Visogota, so afraid, but at least as yourself, as lucid, as serene as you can get. And on the contrary, if you are spending it violently or uh, in a bad manner, you embrace it.
Yeah, I feel like I have so many more thoughts on this,
Yeah.
just on the subject of death. But yeah. And as we get to the close of the chapter, by rejecting the name Falca and declaring herself Ciri of Kaer Morhen before the sentries at Dundare, how does she reclaim her agency and her identity? And does this represent true liberation, or does it perpetuate a cycle of violence?
So for the reclaim of agency and identity, I think totally. I think that's one of the first time that we see her declaring herself as a Witcher girl or as a City of Kaer Morhen. So I think that it's sort of reclaiming herself as she wants and not as other wants. That's the moment in which she stopped being a sort of chameleon that's adapt to everyone. That there is every situation she is completely different and adapting to whatever the occasion brings. And in this case, she stopped this cycle of changing herself and decide what she want to do and how she want to be perceived. She doesn't see herself anymore as Falca, but as Ciri as herself. However, I don't think that complete liberation, I think that's the first step. So she cleanses herself from the sin of her past or her changing her ways. But I don't think that's a complete liberation. I think that she's on the good track, but she continues to react blindly, violently, without thinking about any other alternative. So, first moment in which she enters, she knows that she's going there simply to kill them all, not to sort of in a different way. And and I think that at the end of the scene, she does another step in which she understands that probably it's not the best way, and not she's not so confident on her initial thought of, yeah, I'm a witch girl, so I will fight evil and I will kill evil. But after she actually do what she has planned, she reconciled that, okay, probably it's not the way how you kill evil or how you fight back evil. She recognized that it's a vengeance and a instinctive reaction to fight back on whatever she has gone for. So if I see something, someone with a blade on his hand, I cut him off because that's the fastest way to remove the threat, but
Hmm.
it's not the way of removing completely the evildoers or the wrongdoers. So
Yeah.
I think that in this scene we see a couple of steps towards her complete liberation and complete recovery.
Hmm. The choice of name also says a lot. Like Ciri of Kaer Morhen or Cirilla of Kaer Morhen, she's using her given name, the name that was given by Pavetta and Dooney. She is Cirilla, the Lion Cub of Sintra, granddaughter of Calanthe, but at the same time, she says that she is from Kaer Morhen, and she is the student of the Witchers. She is a Witcher girl herself, and I don't think that rejecting the name Falca outright dissolves that identity, but I think she folds it into herself. And she is now the sum of all these parts instead of, as you said, like a little chameleon with whatever will serve her survival at that given moment. So she is the girl who's experienced all of this and can hold it. And I think that offers a lot more, I think, as we look ahead to the last book and to the conclusion of her story, that she's in a place where she is ready to come into her own character and claim her own experiences. Whether, though, it represents true liberation or if it's more of a cycle of violence, I think even she has to figure out. Like, as you said, she has this moment of like wavering uncertainty. The tavern owner is just like, why did you do that? They're going to kill us. And Ciri's like, I'm a witcher, I kill evil. And she's suddenly uncertain about the consequences of her actions, even though she was so sure of them at the start. So I think it's still going to be a continued journey. I think this is only the first step. She knows her own strength, she knows her own capabilities, but I don't know if she's figured out when to use them. Until that happens, she's going to continue perpetuating the cycle of violence that she talked about with Visigoda so earnestly. But I think that there's something to be learned there about temperance and being a warrior in a garden rather than a gardener in a war. So, as we come to the end of the chapter and the end of our discussion, Nicola, do you have any final thoughts on Tower of Swallows, chapter 10?
As said before, I think it's a very interesting chapter. It's full of action, but it's also full of philosophy and full of thought and discussion. So I think that strikes a good mix between the two. So you get the interesting action, but also the difficulty and the gray shades of this world that it's really a signature of this the work of Sapkowski. So I think that it's very interesting and good mix of the two, framing it as the changing and as the growth of City. It's very fulfilling to read. because we have seen her grow since very early childhood.
Since she was a fetus. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And so now we see her reaching the point in which she start to really believe in herself and become a force to be reckoned with. So I really liked it as a chapter and as a book in general.
I think chapter 10 is like the perfect penultimate chapter. It takes all of the stuff we saw at the beginning of the book in chapter 1 that we didn't really understand and takes it to fruition so it is meaningful. And we see how all of this foreshadowing plays out, and now we know. And with Ciri, these things are no longer happening to her. She now has her own agency and she is ready to be a character of action, which is exciting. Yay! As we have one more chapter and the rest of the saga. It is a very meaty chapter, and it is, I think, despite all of its violence and gore, still has a couple of fun points that we discussed about. And this was really the chapter that made me affectionate toward Tawny Owl's Hansa. Again, as evil as they are, there's still some levity in their approach and the silliness of Rince's pancake treatment, and even Kenna's own inner monologue. I find her a very interesting character to listen in on her thoughts. So much going on here. So many things happen. But what an enjoyable ride, and I'm glad I got to go on it with you too, Nicola.
That's for me.
So that is it for our show today. Nicola, thank you so much for joining us for this episode, and thank you to our Hansa for listening. So where can people find you, and is there anything that our community can help you with, or anything that you'd like to share with them?
I have opened finally an Instagram page in which I'm trying to write down and illustrate sort of bestiary of the Witcher monster that it's called A Biologist on the Continent with
Mm.
dots in between. I'm not very active or regular because I simply post some drawings once in a while, but it's more of a passion project. So I like to draw. I like to imagine how a person like me will fit in, and I will
Mhm.
probably do the same geeky stuff that I do here. So just nerding around creatures and say, okay, how it's work.
Yeah.
And so I try to convey it as a bestiary.
Well, I love you using your powers of science for nerdy, geeky things.
Yeah, exactly. I try to all this information and stuff that I learned about different kind of animals, anatomy or how cell work, and say, okay, I just need to put them in something important that people can say, okay, this always has been worth, and that's describing fictional
Mhm.
monsters. It's quite fun.
I love that. And next episode, join us as we conclude our discussion of Andrzej Sapkowski's Tower of Swallows with Chapter 11. Thanks for joining us at the breakfast table. For show notes, transcripts of each episode, and complete list of our social platforms and listening services, head over to breakfastandbotclair.com. Breakfast and Botclair is created by Alyssa from Good Morn. It's hosted by Alyssa. The show is edited by Alyssa and Caleb Buys, with music by Alex Berner. Breakfast and Botclair is produced by Alyssa in New York City, with Katie the Redhead of Toussaint, Jacob B., Charlotte from Bangberg Glamour, the original Brooch, Libby, John of Riblia, Tom from Australia, Jill Keith the Tabby Witch, Ollie from Sweden, James Carson III, Miriam of Tamaria, Softy, Lisa C., and Sidna. Special thanks to Nicola for joining us for this episode and our international Hansa for their support.